I wiped the kitchen countertop for the third time. It was already perfectly clean, but my hands were still mechanically making the usual motions. Sunday lunch had long since become a tradition, not a pleasant one though. Aiden and Scarlett came over every third Sunday of the month, as if it were an unpleasant but unavoidable duty. I glanced at the clock. It was a little over an hour before they arrived. The roast was slowly simmering in the oven. The smell of rosemary and garlic filled the kitchen, mingling with the aroma of freshly baked apple pie. I got the recipe for the pie from my mother, and she got it from her mother. Family traditions have always held a special meaning to me. My gaze slid to the spacious kitchen with a large wooden table in the middle. It was the table where the whole family had once gathered: Henry, me, little Aiden. We laughed, discussed the day, made plans for the future. Now it was just me, and occasionally Iris, my longtime friend, and once a month, Aiden and Scarlett. The house seemed too big for a lonely 73-year-old woman, but I couldn't imagine living anywhere else. Every corner of the place held memories of 50 years of happy marriage to Henry. It had been 2 years since he'd been gone, but sometimes I thought I could still hear his footsteps in the hallway or his soft laughter from the study. I wiped my hands on a kitchen towel and walked into the living room. The heavy velvet curtains, the antique buffet with its collection of china, the worn but still elegant couch, these things were all witnesses to our lives. Henry and I had collected them bit by bit, each piece with its own story. Scarlett called the furnishings museum junk and never missed an opportunity to hint that the house needed updating. Above the fireplace hung my portrait, Henry's 20th wedding anniversary gift to me. A young woman with a mop of dark hair and lively brown eyes. It bore little resemblance to the gray-haired woman I was today, with wrinkles in the corners of her eyes and around her mouth. But sometimes, looking at my reflection, I still saw that young literature teacher, in love with life and poetry. I ran my finger along the spines of the books in the closet. Most of them I had read to students in my 35 years of teaching college. Literature was my passion, my refuge, my way of understanding the world. I hoped Aiden would inherit that love, and I did read to him a lot as a child. But over time, computer games and sports replaced books, and when Scarlett came into his life, our interests diverged completely. A phone call interrupted my musings. "Violet, how are you? Getting ready for the Great Sunday Challenge?" Iris's voice sounded as businesslike as ever. "Everything's ready," I smiled involuntarily. "The roast is in the oven, the pie is cooling, and the silverware is polished to a shine." "Why do you bother?" Iris sounded disapproving. "Your daughter-in-law will find something to complain about, and your son will nod like a Chinese dummy." I sighed. "Iris, please. I know. Stay out of the family business. But Violet, it's ridiculous. You're running around with them and they're— Aiden is my only son," I said softly. "Who lets his wife treat you like a servant?" Iris always said what she thought. It was for that trait that I valued our friendship of nearly 50 years. "Let's not talk about that. Tell me, how's your exhibition coming along?" Iris has taken up a serious interest in watercolors since her retirement and recently received an offer to exhibit her work at a local gallery. "Oh, that's great." She's revitalized. "Yesterday, I finished the last landscape in the Seasons in Gardnerville series. Are you coming to the opening next Friday?" "Sure." I was glad to change the subject. "I wouldn't miss it. By the way," Iris lowered her voice, "Knox Winthrop will be there. You remember, our lawyer? He's a widower now, too, and, he always had a thing for you." "Iris!" I shook my head. "At my age, it's too late to think about such things." "Nonsense. 73 is not an age. We're still young women, Violet." She laughed. "Well, I'll leave you to it. Call me after their visit and let me know how it went." I hung up and looked at Henry's picture on the mantelpiece. He was smiling that special smile of his that made his eyes crinkle. Aiden looked so much like him outwardly, the same dark hair, the same turn of the shoulders. But he's like my mother in character, just as compliant, just as dependent on other people's opinions. When he brought Scarlett to meet us, I immediately felt uneasy. There was something about this young woman, beautiful, well-groomed, always impeccably dressed, that alarmed me. Perhaps it was her overly calculating gaze, or the way she looked around our house, lingering on the family heirlooms. Henry whispered to me then, "Don't make it up, dear. She's just nervous." I tried to convince myself that he was right. The first few years of their marriage were relatively peaceful. Scarlett was polite, albeit aloof. But after Henry was born, our relationship began to deteriorate. She wouldn't let me spend as much time with my grandson as I would have liked, always finding reasons to cancel scheduled appointments. And when Henry Sr. got sick, Aiden and Scarlett almost stopped coming, citing busyness. I didn't hold it against them. I understood that a young family has its own life, its own worries. But when Henry was gone and I was alone in the big house, I wanted their support so badly, which I didn't have much of. They came to the funeral, spent 2 days with me, and disappeared for a month while I dealt with the paperwork, insurance, and all the formalities of leaving a loved one. It was then that Aiden first talked about selling the house. "You don't need that much space, Mom, and stairs can be dangerous at your age. We'll find you a nice apartment closer to us." I flatly refused. Later, I learned from mutual friends that they were having financial difficulties. Scarlett had lost her job at a marketing agency, and Aiden couldn't get a promotion. Apparently, the money from the sale of their parents' house seemed like a good way out. They hadn't insisted, at least not openly. But every visit since then had been accompanied by hints about how hard it was for me to manage a big house on my own, how dangerous it was to live alone at my age, how expensive it was to maintain an old building. And Scarlett never missed an opportunity to mention the lovely nursing home near their neighborhood. I checked on the roast and started setting the table. I pulled out the finest china, another family heirloom. Scarlett would probably say something like, "Why go to all that trouble? You could have done with everyday china." But I wanted to keep at least a semblance of family tradition. Sometimes I wondered why I kept having these dinners. Aiden would arrive looking like he was doing a burdensome chore. Scarlett could barely hide her irritation, and I still hoped one day to see the warmth in my son's eyes. The time when he'd come to share his joys and sorrows with me, when there was no wall between us. Maybe it was the age? At 73, you begin to especially appreciate family ties, realizing that there is less and less time to correct mistakes, or just do not want to recognize the obvious, that your only child, to whom you gave so much love, turned into a stranger, concerned only about the material side of your relationship. They're not bringing their grandson today either. It had been 5 months since Scarlett had found reasons to leave the boy at home, whether it was a cold, an important training session, or a friend's birthday party. I've been seeing my grandson less and less these past few years, and it's been breaking my heart. Little Henry was the only thread that connected me not only to the past, but also to the future. The doorbell rang, sharp, impatient, not like Henry's or Aiden's when I was a kid. I fixed my hair, straightened the folds in my dress, and went to open the door. Aiden and Scarlett stood on the doorstep. My son looked tired. There were shadows under his eyes, new wrinkles at the corners of his mouth. The last time I'd seen him was a month ago, but it seemed like he'd aged years. Scarlett, on the other hand, looked flawless, perfect styling, flawless makeup, a fancy dress that emphasized her slim figure. "Hello, Mom." Aiden hugged me awkwardly, then pulled back quickly, as if he was afraid the hug would take too long. "Violet." Scarlett nodded, not even attempting a hug. A polite smile froze on her face, not affecting her eyes. Come in, I'm so glad to see you. I stepped aside to let them in. How's Henry? Why didn't you bring him with you again? He has a swimming competition. Scarlett answered quickly. A very important one. We couldn't let him miss them. I nodded, pretending to believe it. Last time it was a cold. Before that, it was an important school project. Something smells burnt in here. Scarlett sniffed as she entered the hallway. Did you remember to turn off the oven, Violet? I knew it wasn't burnt. The roast was perfect. But instead of objecting, I just smiled. I'll check. Come into the living room and I'll get an aperitif. I heard Scarlett's quiet voice in the kitchen. Do you see how she forgets the basics? One day she'll start a fire, and then it'll be too late to say, I told you so. Aiden said something indistinctly. I pressed my lips together and concentrated on arranging the appetizers nicely on my plate. It's just another Sunday lunch, I reminded myself. Just a few hours and they'll be gone. But somehow today, the familiar mantra didn't bring relief. We sat at a table set with my finest china and crystal. Henry had always loved it when I pulled out our wedding set. He'd said food tasted better when you ate from beautiful dishes. Scarlett's lips tightened as she looked at the table. Violet, you really shouldn't have gotten that museum china. We could have eaten from ordinary plates. I poured wine into glasses, red for me and Aiden, white for Scarlett as she preferred. I enjoy using beautiful things, I said calmly. Besides, we haven't seen each other in a month. Trust me, our IKEA plates are just as good, but you don't have to spend half an hour hand-washing them. Scarlett took a sip of wine and frowned. Sour. I saw Aiden give my wife a warning look. He always did that, like he was trying to keep her from being too harsh, but he never objected out loud. How's your project going, son? I decided to turn the conversation to a neutral topic. Last time I spoke to you, you said you were working on something interesting. Aiden perked up. Yeah, we're working on a new marketing strategy. If it goes well, I might get a promotion to deputy director of the department. You could, Scarlett said, stabbing at a piece of meat with her fork, if the management knew how to appreciate a capable employee. Aiden tensed again. Honey, I'm sure this time. You say that every time. Scarlett cut him off. And then, those old stumps promote some boss's nephew again. I put a plate of vegetables on the table. How's it going with you, Scarlett? Did you find a new job? After she was fired from the marketing agency, she tried several companies, but was unsuccessful. I'm not going to work for pennies. She cut off a piece of meat and examined it critically. It's a little hot. I'm sorry. I smiled weakly. I'll be more careful next time. Honey, the meat's fine. Aiden tried to lighten the mood. Mom always made the best roast in Gardnerville. Scarlett ignored his comment. And those curtains are long overdue for a change, Violet. They look like they remember World War I. Maybe. I didn't bother to remind him that Henry had chosen them and that they were my favorite memory. But they're fine with me. Scarlett glanced meaningfully at Aiden. He coughed and sipped his wine as if gathering his resolve. Mom, Scarlett and I have been wanting to have a serious talk with you for a long time. He set his glass down and awkwardly adjusted his tie. Something in his tone made me wary. I slowly put down my fork. I'm listening. We're thinking, Aiden started, but Scarlett interrupted him. You should think about moving, Violet. This house is too big for a lonely old woman. What Scarlett means, Aiden interjected, is that we're concerned about your safety and comfort. I shifted my gaze from one to the other. I'm perfectly comfortable in my own home, and I'm perfectly capable of maintaining it. Don't be naive. Scarlett set her glass down with such force that the wine shook, nearly spilling over the edge. You're not young anymore. What if you fall down the stairs? Who would help you? I have neighbors. I tried to keep my voice steady. Iris lives across the street. She comes by almost every day. Iris is as old as you are. Scarlett snorted. What would she do in an emergency? Scarlett. Aiden looked genuinely shocked. Watch what you say. She rolled her eyes. I'm just telling the truth. Mom? She always said that word with a subtle irony. You have to be reasonable. We've found a wonderful place, Sun Terraces. It's a state-of-the-art senior complex with 24-hour medical care. I remembered seeing their brochure on the coffee table once before. Scarlett must have accidentally left it there on a previous visit. I'm not moving into a nursing home, I said firmly. And that's exactly what Sun Terrace is, no matter how fancy they call it. Mom, Aiden took my hand. It's not a regular nursing home. There are individual cottages, social activities, medical care at all hours of the day and night. And it's close to us. We'll be able to see each other more often. I gently released my hand. How often do you visit me now? Once a month? And with obvious reluctance. What makes you think you'll be coming to these terraces more often? Aiden looked ashamed, but Scarlett straightened up more. That's exactly why you need to move. You're all alone here, huddled in four walls, stuck in the past. At the terraces, you'll have socialization, new friends, activities. I have enough socializing, I countered. Book club twice a week, volunteering at the library on Wednesdays, painting lessons with Iris. You're clinging to the past, Scarlett interrupted again. This house is a museum of Henry's memory. It's not healthy, Violet. I felt a wave of anger rising inside me, but I held it back. Henry always said, Violet, your self-control is your strength. And I'd learned to stay calm even in the most provocative situations. I'm not discussing this matter, I said flatly. This is my home, and I'll stay here as long as I want and as long as I can. Aiden looked upset. Mom, we want what's best for you. Let's be honest. Scarlett set aside her fork and knife. It costs a lot of money to run this house. Taxes, insurance, repairs. What are you going to live on when you run out of savings? My pension and Henry's insurance are enough to cover my needs, I said, though I knew exactly what she was getting at. And your father and I have always been in the habit of saving, Aiden. But you could live a much more comfortable life, Scarlett insisted. Sell the house, put the money in something safe, and you'd get interest. Plus, no worries about repairs, cleaning, a gardener. I looked at my son. Are you okay with that? Do you really want me to sell the house where you grew up? Where every corner holds memories of our family? Aiden squirmed uncomfortably in his chair. Mom, I just want you to be safe and not need anything. And even better, Scarlett put in, would be if you deed the house to Aiden. That way you wouldn't have to pay the estate sale tax. So that was it. It was all becoming very clear. When did you have time to consult a lawyer about this? I asked, trying not to show how deeply hurt I was. Scarlett, we hadn't discussed a deed of gift. Aiden looked confused. But that would have been the most sensible option, Scarlett countered. Violet was going to leave the house to you anyway, so why not do it now? It would save everyone the trouble and expense. I got up from the table and began to collect the plates. I don't think dessert is necessary, is it? You've made the purpose of your visit clear. Mom, Aiden stood up. You've got it all wrong. We just want to help me out of my financial burden. I looked him straight in the eye. Or help yourself solve your financial problems? Scarlett stood up abruptly. What nonsense. We're doing just fine. Really? I turned to her. Then why is Aiden still working in a position that clearly doesn't suit him? Why haven't you found a job yet? Why haven't you been able to go on vacation this year, even though you've always vacationed abroad before? Aiden turned pale, and Scarlett blushed with anger. Are you following us? She blurted out. Gathering gossip? Gardnerville is a small town, I replied calmly. People talk. Besides, I'm still interested in my son's life. I started putting the dishes in the sink. My hands were shaking slightly, but I didn't want them to notice. Violet. Scarlett followed me into the kitchen. You're being unreasonable. This house is just a building of wood and stone. Why cling to it? Henry's gone anyway. I turned to her. You don't get to tell me about Henry. Mom. Aiden appeared in the kitchen doorway. Scarlett didn't mean to hurt you. No? I raised an eyebrow. Then why does she keep saying things that can't help but hurt? Aiden threw up his hands helplessly. She's just straightforward. It's her way of talking. No, son, it's not directness. It's tactlessness and cruelty. And you let her treat me like that. To your mother. I saw Aiden press his lips together. He'd always done that when he was a kid, when he'd been found out about something unpleasant. But now he wasn't a child. He was a grown man, letting his wife insult his mother. I'm not allowing it, he objected weakly. I'm just trying to find a compromise. What kind of compromise could there be? I sighed. Either I stay in my house or I sell it and move to Sun Terrace. It's not a compromise, Aiden. It's an ultimatum. Scarlett snorted. What drama? You make it sound like we're suggesting you move to the slums. Sun Terraces is a luxury complex. Aiden supported his wife. A lot of people would like to live there. Then why don't you sell your house and move there? I asked. If it's so wonderful. Scarlett rolled her eyes. Because we're not 73 years old. Because we have a growing son who needs space. Because you don't want to live in a nursing home. I finished for her. Neither do I. I went back to the dining room and sat down at the table. I felt exhausted, like I'd run a marathon. Aiden stomped awkwardly in the doorway, and Scarlett glared at me, arms crossed over her chest. Mom, my son finally said, understand, we're really worried about you. What if something happens to you when you're alone? Who's going to help? I have a panic button, I reminded him. I wear it at all times. The button won't make dinner or clean the house, Scarlett countered. Soon you won't be able to manage your own household. When that moment comes, I'll hire an assistant. I tried to speak calmly, though my insides were churning. I have enough money for that. You're just being stubborn, Scarlett shook her head. All this sentimentality about the house is just an excuse. You don't want to admit that you're getting old and need help. I'm well aware of my age, I replied. I just don't think it's necessary to give up my independence early. Aiden finally sat down at the table. Mom, we're not suggesting that you give up your independence. At the terraces, you'll have your own cottage, your own kitchen. You'll just have help when you need it. And all this for a small fee of $10,000 a month, I added ironically. Well, the house is worth a lot more than that, Scarlett retorted. If you sold it, you'd have enough money to live there for years. I shook my head. Do you really think I don't know what's going on? You need the money from the sale of the house. If you were genuinely concerned about my well-being, you'd offer to move in with you. What? Scarlett looked like I offered to eat a toad. Do you want to live with us? No, I smiled at her face. I'm just showing how insincere your concern is. You don't want me to live with you. You want me to sell the house, give you the money, and die quietly somewhere else. Aiden looked ashamed. Mom, you're not being fair. Am I? I looked at him. Tell me honestly, Aiden, if I had decided to bequeath the house to charity instead of to you, would you have insisted that I move to Sun Terrace? The son hesitated, not knowing what to say. Scarlett glared. You wouldn't dare. It's a family home. It should stay in the family. So this is about the house, not my well-being. I nodded. Thank you for your honesty, Scarlett. You always say what you mean. Unlike some people, she snapped, glancing at Aiden. Aiden sighed. Let's not fight. Mom, we just wanted to talk. No one is going to force you out of the house. I'm glad to hear that. I stood up. Because I'm not moving anywhere. Not now, not in the foreseeable future. Scarlett stood up too. Well, that's fine. But don't come asking for help when you can't climb those endless stairs or when the roof falls apart and you don't have the money to fix it. Scarlett, Aiden began warningly. No, really, she raised her voice. We're offering her a reasonable, grown-up solution, and she's acting like a cranky old woman clinging to her porcelain figurines and dusty scrapbooks. I felt the color flood my face. Enough! I rarely raised my voice, but I couldn't take it now. You're in my house, Scarlett, the house that Henry and I bought with our own labor, paying the mortgage for almost 20 years, the house where your husband grew up. And you have no right to talk to me like that. And you have no right to accuse us of being self-serving. She was almost shouting. We're thinking of your welfare, and you act like we're trying to rob you. Aiden stepped between us. Enough, both of you. This isn't going anywhere. Scarlett grabbed her purse. You're right. This conversation is useless. Your mother is too stubborn to listen to reason. She headed for the exit, and I followed her and Aiden into the hallway. At the door, my son turned around awkwardly. I'm sorry, Mom. We didn't mean to upset you. I'm not upset, I replied. I'm disappointed. And it's good that we finally had a frank conversation. Scarlett opened the door. Goodbye, Violet. I hope you'll think about our proposal. I will, I nodded. Goodbye. When the door closed behind them, I walked slowly back into the dining room and sat down in my seat. I stared at the unfinished dinner, at the glasses of wine. The family dinner that was supposed to bring us closer together had only widened the gap between us. For the first time, I allowed myself to recognize the obvious. My son wasn't just influenced by my wife, he shared her views. Perhaps he was not so direct and ruthless, but deep down he wanted the same thing, to get rid of his burdensome mother and get the money from the sale of the house. I thought about the will Henry and I had drawn up years ago, a standard document that transferred all property to the surviving spouse and, upon his death, to his only son. It seemed natural and right at the time. Now, I pushed those thoughts away. No matter what, Aiden was still my son, my flesh and blood. Maybe he was just confused, influenced by Scarlett's strong personality. Maybe in time, but the worm of doubt was already lodged in my soul. And as I gathered the plates from the table, I realized that today's conversation was only the beginning. They won't give up so easily. It had been almost 5 days since our unfortunate dinner. I tried to do the usual things. I visited the book club on Tuesday, spent half a day at the library on Wednesday, helping to catalog newly arrived books, and went to a painting class with Iris on Thursday. But my thoughts kept returning to my conversation with Aiden and Scarlett. I couldn't help but feel that something had finally broken in our relationship that day. It was the first time I'd seen so clearly what my son had really become weak, dependent on my wife's opinion, willing to sacrifice my interest for his own comfort. However, I did not absolve myself of responsibility. Hadn't I turned a blind eye to the way Aiden had changed over the years? Hadn't I pretended not to notice Scarlett's dismissive attitude? Friday night, the phone rang. It was Aiden. His voice sounded unnaturally cheerful. Mom, Scarlett and I are thinking of coming over tomorrow. We want to take you to that new restaurant downtown. They say it's got great food. I hesitated to answer. Invitations like that were rare. Usually our meetings were limited to dinner at my house. Why the sudden generosity? I finally asked. What kind of question is that, Mom? Aiden tried to laugh. Do we need a special occasion to take you to a restaurant? Usually, yes. I didn't see the point in pretending. After that conversation on Sunday, Mom, my son interrupted me. Let's not go back to that. We were too pushy, I admit it. This is your life, your home. We just want to apologize for that unpleasant conversation. It was so unlike them, especially Scarlett, that I got suspicious. But he's my son, and if he really wants a relationship, how can I say no? Okay, I agreed. What time are you planning? 7 p.m. We'll pick you up. No need, I'll drive myself. Where's that restaurant? Lauren's on Main Street. But really, Mom, it's not that hard for us to stop by. I prefer to manage my own time, I said softly but firmly. I'll see you at 7. After I talked to Aiden, I called Iris. She listened to me and snorted. And you believe they suddenly realized they were wrong? Violet, you're too trusting. But he's my son, I sighed. I have to give him a chance. Just remember to keep your eyes open, Iris warned me. They're up to something. Mark my words. On Saturday, I was meticulously packed. I picked out a dark blue dress. Henry always said it was the right color for me. I pinned on the sapphire brooch my husband gave me for my 40th birthday. I arranged my hair, gray but still thick, into a neat style. I put on a little makeup, light foundation, a little blush, and a soft pink lipstick. I hadn't gone out to restaurants much in recent years, but I wanted to look decent. Despite my age, I still cared about my appearance. Henry had taught me that, Violette, a woman should look elegant at any age. Lauren's restaurant was one of those trendy places that pop up in small towns, trying to appear cosmopolitan. Dim lighting, minimalist interiors, a menu with a pretension to sophistication. Aiden and Scarlett were already waiting at a table. When I approached, Aiden stood up and awkwardly hugged me. Scarlett gave me a nod and a strained smile. She was wearing a tight black dress and large gold jewelry, a little flashy for a place like this, but certainly expensive. You look beautiful, Mom, Aiden said, pulling up a chair for me. Thank you. I sat down and looked around. This is an interesting place. Do you come here often? Second time. Scarlett shrugged. There aren't many decent restaurants in Gardnerville. But the prices are like the capital, I said, glancing at the menu. You shouldn't have spent so much. We can afford it, Scarlett responded immediately. Don't worry about our finances. I remained silent, even though her tone suggested that our evening might be going down the wrong path. We ordered aperitifs, a white wine for Aiden and me, a cocktail for Scarlett. The conversation swirled around neutral topics at first. The weather, the city news, the upcoming school play that little Henry was in. You should come, Grandma, Aiden said. Henry will be glad to see you. I'd love to, I smiled. When is the play? Next Friday. Scarlett took a sip of her cocktail. But I'm afraid it's going to be crowded and noisy. I'm not sure it's the right place for a... For who? I raised an eyebrow. An old woman? I'm not that infirm yet, Scarlett. I'm just concerned for your comfort, she smiled, but her eyes remained cold. Dinner was served, dainty but tiny portions on huge plates. Aiden tried to change the subject. How's your book club, Mom? What are you reading right now? A Thousand Shining Suns by Khaled Hosseini, I replied. It's a terrific book. Would you? I've read it, Scarlett interrupted. It's too depressing. Why would you fill your head with such dark stories at your age? I felt a pang of irritation. At our age, as you put it, you're not afraid to face reality, no matter how dark it is. Unlike some young people who prefer to hide from their problems behind a pretty facade. Aiden coughed. Let's not argue about literature. We all have our own tastes. Of course, I took a sip of wine, and everyone's entitled to their own opinions. Speaking of opinions, Scarlett set her fork aside. Have you thought about our conversation, Violet? About what, exactly? I knew what she was getting at, but I wanted her to be direct. About the house, of course. She rolled her eyes. About thinking about a better place for you to live. I saw Aiden tense, but he didn't say anything. We agreed not to go back to that, I reminded him calmly. Aiden said not to push. Scarlett pursed her lips. But I think we should call things by their proper names. You're 73 years old, Violet. You can't stay in this big house forever. I can, as long as I can take care of myself. I put down my knife and fork. And I don't understand why that question bothers you so much, Scarlett. Because I care about my family. She raised her voice, and several customers at neighboring tables turned around. You're Aiden's mother, Henry's grandmother. Your stubbornness affects us all. How does my decision to stay in my own home affect you? I tried to speak softly, not drawing attention from the others. Scarlett leaned across the table toward me. Because we have to worry all the time about whether you're okay. Because Aiden has to drive across town to see if you've fallen down the stairs. As I recall, you visit me once a month, and then only reluctantly. I couldn't keep the sarcasm out of my voice. Don't start, Mom. Aiden finally intervened. We're really worried. Really? I looked at my son. Then why haven't you said anything all week since we last talked? Not a call, not a text, to see how I was feeling after your show of concern. Aiden lowered his eyes guiltily. I thought you needed time. Time for what, Aiden? To get over the idea that my only son is only interested in getting the money from the sale of the house? It's not fair, he protested, but his voice sounded unconvincing. Stop playing the innocent, Scarlett intervened. Yes, we need the money. What's wrong with that? You're sitting on a fortune locked up in this old house, while your son and grandson could use the funds now, when they're really needed. I set my glass on the table and looked her straight in the eye. So that's it. I'm sitting on a fortune. The house that Henry and I bought after paying the mortgage for 30 years, the house that we invested not only money but a piece of our souls in, is just a financial asset to you? Don't be so dramatic. Scarlett waved her hand dismissively. Sure, this house is filled with memories for you, but it's just a building, whereas the money from its sale could really help your family. Isn't that what Henry would want? I felt anger rise in me at the mention of my husband's name. Don't you dare talk about what Henry would have wanted. You didn't even really know him. I know my husband, she countered. And I know that Aiden and I are scrimping on everything because we have to pay the mortgage on the house your grandson is growing up in, while you're holding on to funds that could help us all. Funds? I grinned bitterly. So this is how you see my husband's legacy? As means? How else am I supposed to see it? Scarlett raised her voice, and now the customers at the neighboring tables were staring at us openly. It's money, Violet. Money that could be used for your grandson's education, for paying off our mortgage, for your designer handbags and jewelry. I nodded at her bracelet, which I had seen in a catalog and knew its value. On your annual vacations in the Caribbean? Scarlett blushed angrily. You keep track of our spending? Are you compiling files? No need, I shook my head. You talk about your purchases and travels every time you meet. And that's perfectly normal. You're young. You want to live life to the fullest. But why at the expense of selling my house? Because it makes sense, Scarlett was almost shouting. You don't need it anymore. It's too big. It needs maintenance, repairs. And the money could help your family now, not 10 years from now, when I'm dead? Is that what you mean, Scarlett? That waiting for me to die is too long? Aiden turned pale. Mom, that's not what Scarlett meant. Stop speaking for me. Scarlett turned sharply to her husband. That's exactly what I meant. Why wait? What's the point of having that money just sitting there dead weight while we have to make every dime count? Yes, The house will go to Aiden when you die, but why wait when you can use the funds now? I felt something snap inside. They were sitting in front of me, my son and his wife, and openly discussing how they would use my money after I died. It was as if I was no longer a living person, but a mere obstacle to wealth. You don't know the contents of my will, I said quietly. Scarlett froze. What do you mean? Aiden is your only child. Who else can you leave the house to? I didn't say anything, and that seemed to piss her off completely. She grabbed her wine glass and threw it in my face. You selfish, vindictive old woman. You think you can manipulate us by threatening to disinherit us? I froze in shock. Cold wine ran down my face, staining my dress. The napkins on the table became wet almost instantly. The whole restaurant seemed to fall silent. Scarlett! Aiden jumped up. What are you doing? But his wife was furious. What you should have done. Put her in her place. She's been playing games with us for years, promising us help, hinting at an inheritance, and now that we really need the money, she suddenly decides she can blackmail us. I never, I started, trying to wipe the wine off my face with shaking hands. Shut up. Scarlett stood up and hovered over me. All your life you've played the part of the perfect mother, the model teacher, the perfect wife. But in reality, you're just a bossy, self-loving woman who can't accept that her time has passed. And before anyone could react, she swung around and slapped me across the face, a resounding, humiliating slap that made my ears ring. Aiden grabbed her arm. Scarlett, stop. You're crazy. And that's when I saw what broke my heart. Before I could intervene, before I could act outraged, my son grinned for a split second. A subtle, understated grin that I might not have noticed if I hadn't been looking him straight in the eye. My son was enjoying the scene. Somewhere deep inside, he was enjoying my humiliation. I rose slowly. The restaurant was plunged into shocked silence. Waiters froze against the walls. Customers kept their eyes on us. I could feel the wine dripping down my chin, my cheek burning from the impact. Mom, Aiden started, but I stopped him with a gesture. Don't. My voice sounded surprisingly calm. I understood everything I needed to understand. I grabbed my purse and headed for the exit, trying to walk straight with my head held high, even though my knees were buckling from the shock. Mom, wait! Aiden came after me. I'm taking you home. I turned back to him at the door of the restaurant. No need. I'm perfectly capable of driving myself. And don't call me. I need time to think about what happened. But Mom, he looked confused. Scarlett didn't mean she just had a temper. Don't lie. I looked him straight in the eye. Not to myself, not to me. It wasn't a sudden, spontaneous action. Your wife has wanted to put me in my place for a long time, as she put it. And you were happy about it. What? He tried to act outraged. How could you? I saw your grin, Aiden. I shook my head. And you know what the saddest part is? It's not that Scarlett's acting like a spoiled, aggressive child. It's that my son, my only child, the one I raised with love, is taking pleasure in humiliating me. Aiden turned pale. Mom, I swear, don't swear. I looked away. Just leave me alone, and don't come to my place until I call you. I walked out of the restaurant and hailed a cab. All the way home, I sat staring straight ahead of me, not letting the tears flow. It wasn't until I was in the safety of my home, locking the door, that I let myself burst into tears. Tears rolled down my cheeks as I mechanically removed the ruined dress, washed my face, changed my clothes. The dress was hopelessly ruined. The white wine had left distinct stains on the dark blue fabric. My cheek was burning from the slap. I was sure it would be bruised by morning, but the physical pain was nothing compared to the mental pain. My son, my boy, How could he? I sat in Henry's chair, clutching his picture to my chest, and sobbed like I hadn't even sobbed at his funeral. At the time, I thought I had a pillar of strength, my son. Now I realized that this support was an illusion. After midnight, when the tears finally dried up, I made a decision. I would no longer allow them to manipulate me, to use me, to destroy the dignity I had spent a lifetime building. First thing in the morning, I'll call Knox Winthrop, Henry and I's longtime attorney, and set up an appointment. It's time to revise the will. I'm not going to let these people, yes, I now thought of my own son and his wife as these people, dispose of what Henry and I had spent a lifetime building. A house in which every corner holds the memory of our love should not go to those who see it only as a financial asset. It may be cruel, it may sever the last threads that bind me to my son, but I cannot do otherwise. I owe it to Henry. I owe it to myself. I owe it to all the years of happiness we've shared. As I fell asleep, I remembered Henry's favorite saying, "Patience is a virtue, but there are times when inaction becomes complicity." I'd been patient for too long, turning a blind eye, making excuses. It's time to act. The morning was overcast. Low clouds hung over Gardnerville, threatening to rain. I stood at the window, clutching my cup of cold tea, looking out at the wet garden paths. My cheeks still ached from Scarlett's slap, not so much physically, but as a reminder of yesterday's humiliation. The phone rang several times, Aiden, according to the caller ID. I didn't pick up. What could he say? What excuses could he make for his wife and himself? I didn't want to hear another round of lies. After the third ring, I disconnected the phone. Then I pulled Knox Winthrop's business card out of the nightstand and dialed his cell phone, a privilege of old friendship. "Knox, it's Violet Pembroke. Sorry for the early call on a Sunday." "Violet, dear." The voice of an old friend sounded warm and a little sleepy. "It's nothing. What's wrong?" "I need to see you urgently." "About my will." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Of course," he finally answered. "I can come by your place today. Say 2 o'clock? Thanks, Knox. I'll be waiting." I hung up the phone and sank heavily into the chair. The decision had been made, but that didn't make it any easier. My son, my flesh and blood, my only child. But did I have to endure humiliation and betrayal for the sake of kinship? I called Iris. I needed someone to be there for me, someone to support me in my time of need. "I'll be there in half an hour," she said, listening to a brief recounting of yesterday's incident. "And don't change your mind about the will." Iris arrived as promised and gasped when she saw my face. "Oh my God, Violet. You should have called the police right away." "Why?" I shook my head. "So that the whole town could talk about how my daughter-in-law slapped my mother-in-law in a restaurant? No, I can't do that. But that's assault." Iris shook her hands. "Let's not talk about that." I sank down in my chair tiredly. "Tell me, am I doing the right thing?" Iris sat down opposite me. "You mean the will?" "Absolutely. Those two don't deserve a dime of what you and Henry have created. It's not just about the money," I sighed. "This house, it holds so many memories. Every room, every corner is connected to some story from our lives. The thought of Scarlett taking over after I'm gone, throwing out all our stuff, repainting the walls. That's why you have to change the will," Iris said firmly, "so that the house would go to someone who would appreciate its history, not just sell it for more money." At 2 o'clock, Knox Winthrop arrived, a tall, trim man with a neatly trimmed gray beard. Despite his age, he was 68. He looked youthful and energetic. When he saw my face, he frowned. "Violet, what happened? Who did this?" I briefly recounted yesterday's incident, trying to be as dry and matter-of-fact as a business meeting. But my voice still shook when I got to the part with Aiden's grin. Knox listened without interrupting. Only the jaundices in his cheekbones were moving, a sign of restrained anger. When I finished, he asked, "Are you sure you don't want to file a police report?" "Absolutely. I just want to change the will." He nodded and pulled a folder out of his briefcase. "I brought a copy of your current will with me. Before we start discussing changes, read it again." I ran my eyes over the document, though I remembered its contents well. When Henry died, all of his property would go to me, and when I died, it would go to Aiden, the standard will we'd made years ago, when the future had seemed clear and predictable. "I want to change everything," I said firmly, handing the document back to Knox. "The house, the bills, all the personal effects. I don't want Aiden and Scarlett to have it." Knox fixed his glasses. "You know the law says that spouses are entitled to a share of the inheritance, even if they're not named in the will?" "I don't have a spouse." I shook my head. "Henry died 2 years ago." "I mean, Scarlett, as Aiden's wife, could claim part of the inheritance through him if he decided to contest the will. And he probably would." I wondered. Knox was right. Aiden would probably sue if I cut him out of the will completely. "What do you suggest?" "Leave him a minimum share to make it harder for him to contest." Knox opened his notebook. "For example, we could bequeath him some cash, enough to make it look like a meaningful part of the inheritance, but not too much. And the rest? We could distribute it to charities." He looked at me over his glasses. "Are there any organizations you're particularly close to?" I wondered. Henry had always supported educational programs, especially those related to literature. In recent years, I'd been thinking more and more about the problems of the elderly and the socially isolated. "The local library," I began. "They've been wanting to open a reading room for underprivileged children for a long time. And also, I was thinking about an elderly support program, something like a hobby club where old people could get together, socialize, do creative work." "Great ideas," Knox wrote down. "We could create a special fund in your name that would support both of these initiatives." "What about the house?" Iris asked. "What will happen to it?" Knox thought. "There are several options. We could sell it after Violet's death and donate the proceeds to the foundation. We could give it to a library or a college for a cultural center. Or a museum?" I suggested. "The house is old. It has the atmosphere of the last century. Maybe the city museum would be interested?" "That's a great idea." Knox wrote that down too. "I can hold preliminary talks with the museum director without revealing your name." We spent the next 2 hours discussing the details of the new will. Iris periodically brought tea and cookies, inserted her own comments, supported me when I began to doubt. "What about Henry Jr.?" I asked at one point. "He wasn't to blame for his parents' actions, was he?" Knox nodded. "We can set up an educational trust fund in his name. The money will be available to him when he reaches a certain age and can only be used for education." 21 years old? I suggested. "Better 25, Iris objected. "At 21, he'd still be under the strong influence of his parents. By 25, he might have formed his own point of view." I agreed. "All right, let's make it 25. And I want the will to make it clear that neither Aiton nor Scarlett can manage or have access to that money." Knox made a note. "We can appoint an independent trustee to administer the trust. I'd recommend choosing someone who isn't connected to the family but knows you well and shares your values." "Maybe you?" I looked at an old friend. "You've known Henry and me for years, seen Aiden grow up." Knox smiled. "I'm afraid by the time Henry Jr. turns 25, I'll be too old for that responsibility. But I can suggest my junior partner, Rachel Kowalski. She's 35 now. She's principled and honest. Plus, she has no ties to your family, which guarantees impartiality." I wondered, Is there any way I can meet her before I make a decision? Sure, I can arrange a meeting next week. We discussed a few more details of the will, and then Knox said, I'll have a draft ready by Wednesday. Will you be able to come to the office to go over it and possibly sign it? Yes, of course. I nodded. And Knox, thank you for everything. He shook my hand. Henry and I have always been good friends, and I'm glad I can help you in your time of need. After Knox left, Iris and I sat in the living room, listening to the rain pounding on the roof. I felt strangely empty, as if something important had been taken out of me, but painful, like a surgical procedure. Are you okay? Iris asked, handing me a fresh cup of tea. I don't know, I answered honestly. I did what I had to do, but it didn't make me feel any better. It's normal. She sat down next to me on the couch. You've just made the decision to cut ties with your son. Even if he deserved it, the pain isn't going anywhere. I nodded, tears welling up in my eyes. You know, I keep thinking, where did I go wrong? How could I have raised a man who lets me treat his mother like that, who secretly rejoices in my humiliation? Iris sighed. Violet, my dear, it's not your fault. You were a wonderful mother, loving, caring, attentive. I watched you raise Aiden. Everyone did. Then why did he turn out like that? I couldn't help the bitterness in my voice. People change. Iris shrugged. Sometimes for the worse. Maybe it was Scarlett's influence, maybe some of his own demons. But you can't blame yourself for his choices. I looked at the pictures on the mantelpiece. Aiden as a child, smiling, with dimples in his cheeks and a trusting gaze. Aiden as a teenager, a little sullen, but still close. Aiden at his college graduation, proud of his accomplishments. Aiden and Scarlett on their wedding day. She in a white dress, he in a strict suit, both glowing with happiness. You know what the scariest part is? I said quietly. I still love him. Despite everything that's happened, I still love my son. And it's tearing me apart. Iris hugged me silently, and I finally let myself cry, not furious, angry tears like yesterday, but quiet, bitter tears, mourning the loss of not only my relationship with my son, but also the image of family that I had so carefully preserved all these years. The crying brought some relief, as if some of the pain was coming out with the tears. When I calmed down, Iris asked, what will you do if Aiden comes to apologize? I wondered, I don't know. Part of me wants to give him another chance, but another part of me realizes that nothing will ever be the same again. I saw something in his eyes yesterday, something foreign, cold. I'm not sure I can get over it. You don't have to make a decision right now. Iris stroked my arm. Give yourself time. What if he doesn't come? The question that had been plaguing me since this morning was finally spoken aloud. What if he chooses Scarlett over me? Then you'll know you did your best. Iris looked me straight in the eye. Violet, you're 73 years old. You've lived a long, full life. You've had a great marriage, a successful career, friends who love you. Aiden is an important part of your life, but not your whole life. I nodded, realizing she was right. Henry had often told me that I put too much of myself into motherhood, that I needed to keep other interests, other connections. The day will come when the chick flies the nest, he'd say, and then you'll need something other than the role of mother. Now, sitting in our living room, surrounded by memories of my husband, I could almost physically feel his presence, his support. What would he say now? Probably that I should be true to myself, to my principles and values, that I deserve respect, especially from my own child, that sometimes you have to let go to keep yourself. You're right, Iris. I straightened up. I can't let this situation define the rest of my life. I've done what I think is right with the will. Now I need to move on with my life. Now that's my Violet, Iris smiled. Strong as ever. Not always, I shook my head. But I try. We spent the rest of the afternoon looking through old photo albums, not the ones with Aiden in them, but the early ones from our youth, from the first years of my marriage to Henry. It helped me switch gears, to remember that my life didn't begin and end with motherhood. That evening, after seeing Iris off, I was alone again in the silence of the big house. Lydia, our mutual friend from the book club, who had somehow already heard about last night's incident at the restaurant, called me. The whole town is talking about it, she said. Scarlett had shown her true colors. I cringed. I wouldn't want it to be the center of gossip. It's too late, dear, Lydia sighed. But don't worry, everyone's on your side. Scarlett was never very popular in Gardnerville. She's too uppity. After I talked to Lydia, I went up to the bedroom and pulled out an old jewelry box from the dresser with Aiden's childhood drawings, his first letters, his school awards. I'd kept these things as a treasure, as proof that I'd once had a loving, close son. Now, going through these time-yellowed relics, I felt a strange sense of detachment, as if I were looking at artifacts of someone else's life. Was the smiling boy who drew the sun, and my mother holding hands, and the man who had grinned at my humiliation yesterday the same person? I closed the box and tucked it back into the dresser. You can't change the past, but you can learn to live at peace with it. As Henry had said in one of our last conversations, life is too short to waste on regrets. Better to gather up all the good things you had and carry them on as light. I took a deep breath and walked over to the window. The rain had stopped and the first stars showed in the gaps between the clouds. Tomorrow would be a new day, and I will face it with my head held high, ready to move on, not just as a mother disappointed in her son, but as Violet Pembroke, a woman with her own life, values, and dignity. On Wednesday, I will sign a new will. It will be the first step toward a new chapter of my life. Perhaps the last, but no less important than all the previous ones. I didn't know if Aiden would come to apologize, if he would try to mend the relationship, but for the first time in years, I realized that I was ready to live without it, with the pain of loss, but also with a newfound sense of freedom and loyalty to myself. It's been 2 weeks since I signed the new will. A strange calm, like the calm before the storm, had enveloped my life. Aiden tried to call several times, leaving messages on my answering machine apologies, explanations, requests to call back. I didn't answer. I needed time to heal and figure out how to move on. That afternoon, I did the usual things, watering the flowers in the conservatory Henry had added to the house in honor of our silver wedding. It was always bright and warm, even on cloudy days. The orchids, my special passion, bloomed one after another, filling the air with their delicate fragrance. The doorbell rang unexpectedly. I looked at my watch. It was about 3 in the afternoon, the time when I usually relaxed with a book in my hands. I wasn't expecting visitors. Standing on the doorstep was Melissa Burke, a former college colleague and now a well-known gossip columnist in town. Over the years, she'd become the kind of older woman who knew everything about everyone and felt it was her duty to share it. "Violet, darling," she exclaimed as soon as I opened the door. I was just driving by and thought I'd drop in on an old friend. We'd never been particularly close, but Melissa tended to call anyone whose secrets she wanted to find out, or who she wanted to tell something to, an old friend. "Melissa, what a surprise!" I tried to make my voice sound friendly. "Come in, I was just about to make some tea." She walked into the living room, looking around with ill-concealed curiosity. "It's still as cozy as ever, Violet, and it hasn't changed at all." A faint note of criticism slipped into her voice. "Why change something that brings you joy?" I smiled, heading for the kitchen. "Have a seat. I'll be right back." As I made tea, I pondered the reason for her sudden visit. Melissa never just dropped by, just passing through. She was always after something, information or the chance to be the first to deliver some breaking news. When I returned with the tray, she was already comfortably seated in her chair, looking at the pictures on the mantelpiece. "You have such beautiful pictures," she said. "You and Henry were a beautiful couple, and Aiden is such an adorable boy in those pictures." I silently set the tray on the table and poured the tea. "How are you feeling, dear?" Melissa asked, taking the cup. "Everyone in town is so worried after that awful thing at the restaurant." "That's what it is." Gossip about the scandal had reached her. "I'm fine, thank you," I replied dryly. "It's just outrageous what happened," Melissa continued, completely oblivious to my tone. "I never thought Scarlett would do something like that. Although, she leaned toward me, lowering her voice as if sharing a secret. A lot of people always thought she was arrogant. Back when she first came to Gardnerville, remember? At the college fundraiser?" I nodded, though I didn't remember anything like that. The important thing was to let Melissa talk, and then she'd be more likely to get to the point of her visit. "She was so on the nose back then." Melissa shook her head. "But to raise her hand against her own mother-in-law, and even in a public place, it's just unbelievable." "Melissa," I decided to cut the outrage short. "I'm sure you didn't come here just to express your sympathy. What brings you here?" She was confused for a moment at my bluntness, but quickly pulled herself together. "Oh, Violet, you were always so perceptive." She laughed in a deliberately light-hearted way. "All right, I confess. I heard," again that conspiratorial tone, "that you changed your will. Is that true?" "That's what it is. Word's already gotten around town. I wonder who the source is." "It's unlikely Knox. He's too professional for this breach of confidentiality. Most likely someone on the staff of the city museum. I knew Knox was in preliminary talks with them about transferring the house after my death. My personal financial decisions are my own business, Melissa." I took a sip of my tea, looking her straight in the eye. "I don't think that's an appropriate topic for small talk." "Oh, of course, of course." She splashed her hands together. "I'm just worried about you, dear. Such serious decisions after emotional upheaval. Are you sure you're not in a hurry?" "I'm in my right mind, if that's what you mean," I replied dryly. "No, no, no." Melissa looked shocked at my assumption. "I never would have thought. It's just, I ran into Aiden at the supermarket yesterday. He seemed so depressed. Said he'd been trying to get in touch with you for 2 weeks, but you weren't answering your phone." I stayed silent, waiting for the rest of the story. "He's really sorry, Violet." Melissa put her hand on my knee, as if we were good friends. "And Scarlett, too." They both realized they were out of line. "How do you know that?" I pulled back, releasing my knee from her hand. "Have you discussed our family relationship with my son?" Melissa blushed. "No, no, it's just, he brought it up. He said that he and Scarlett wanted to make up with you, but they didn't know how to go about it. So I thought, why don't I mediate? I mean, family's the most important thing, right?" I put the cup down and looked at my guest carefully. "Melissa, let's be honest. Aiden sent you to find out if I really did change my will, and if I did, to try to convince me to put things back the way they were." "Violet!" She feigned outrage. "How could you think?" "Because I know my son," I interrupted her. "And I know you, Melissa. You've always loved being at the center of drama, especially other people's drama." She pursed her lips. "Well, Aiden may have mentioned something about the will, but he's really worried. You haven't seen him, Violet. Real circles under his eyes, all gaunt. Losing a potential inheritance is a big blow. I know." I couldn't hold back the sarcasm. Melissa stood up, clearly offended. "You know, Violet, Maybe Scarlett isn't the only one with a problem. Maybe you're not the easiest person to talk to either. I got up too. Thank you for coming, Melissa. It was very, informative. She grabbed her purse. I was just trying to help, but if you'd rather be alone, rejecting your only son, goodbye, Melissa. I headed for the door, letting her know the conversation was over. After she left, I returned to the living room and sank into a chair. So Aiden already knows about the will and is trying to act through a third party. Typical. Always avoided direct confrontation. Not an hour later, the doorbell rang again. This time it was Aiden and Scarlett on the doorstep. She was holding a large bouquet of lilies, my favorite flowers. He looked really gaunt, with red eyes, like he hadn't slept in several nights. Mom, Aiden started. Can we come in? We need to talk. I hesitated. Part of me wanted to slam the door in their faces, but the other part, the part that still remembered the little boy with the trusting eyes, couldn't do that. Come on in. I stepped back, letting them into the house. Let's not have any drama, okay? Scarlett handed me the bouquet. These are for you, Violet. Your favorite. I accepted the flowers, trying not to touch her hands. Thank you. Come into the living room. I'll put them in water. In the kitchen, I took a deep breath, preparing myself for the conversation to come. Something told me it wouldn't be an easy conversation. Placing the lilies in the vase, I returned to the living room. Aiden and Scarlett were sitting side by side on the couch, holding hands, a clear demonstration of a united front. I sat down in the chair across from them, keeping my distance. So, I began, you wanted to talk. I'm listening. Aiden cleared his throat. Mom, first of all, we're here to apologize. What happened at the restaurant? It was unforgivable, Scarlett said, and I noticed that her voice sounded unusually soft. I don't know what came over me, stress at work, financial problems. But that's no excuse. I did a terrible thing, and I'm truly sorry for it. I watched her face closely, eyes downcast, voice trembling, the perfect picture of remorse, too perfect to be real. And you, Aiden? I shifted my gaze to my son. What do you regret? He looked puzzled. I I regret not intervening right away, that I let it get this far. I should have protected you and I smirked. I finished for him. When your wife slapped me, you grinned, Aiden. I saw it. He turned pale. No, Mom, you're wrong. I was in shock. Don't lie. I shook my head. Not to me, not to yourself. I saw your face at that moment. And you know what the worst part was? It wasn't Scarlett's slap. It was your reaction. You were pleased. Aiden lowered his head. I don't know what to say. I didn't mean to. It was some kind of a blur. It doesn't matter. Scarlett intervened, taking the lead again. We're both guilty, and we're both truly sorry. We've come to apologize, and we hope you'll find the strength to forgive us. I remained silent, studying their faces. Scarlett's eyes were not sincere, but calculating. Aiden looked really depressed, but I couldn't tell if it was guilt or the consequences of what they'd done. Tell me honestly, I finally said. Did you come to apologize because you're ashamed or because you found out about my new will? They exchanged quick glances, so quick that an inexperienced observer might not have noticed, but I did. Mom, how can you? Aiden began, but Scarlett interrupted him. Yes, we know about the will. She decided to change tactics. Peter Donovan at the museum told us. There's already a rumor going around town that you're going to leave the house to the city museum. And you're upset about it. I was stating a fact, not asking a question. Of course it upset me. Scarlett raised her voice, but she pulled herself together. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. It's just such a shock to us. We always thought, Aiden always thought he'd inherit the house. It's a family heirloom, a memorial to his father. who you only remembered when you needed something. I couldn't help my bitterness. In the 2 years since Henry's death, you've only come here once a month, as if you were doing your duty. I haven't seen Henry Jr. in almost 6 months, and now you're talking about a family heirloom? We've been busy, Scarlett countered. Aiden has work. I'm looking for a new position. Henry has school, sports. Everyone has things to do and responsibilities. I shrugged. But when you really care about someone, you make time. Mom, Aiden finally spoke. We're not just here about the will. Yes, we found out about it. And yes, it was a blow to us. But more importantly, we want to repair our relationship. You're my only parent. Henry Jr. misses his grandmother. Even Scarlett. Don't. I held up my hand to stop him. Let's be honest, at least for now. If you hadn't found out about the will, you wouldn't have come. You'd have waited until the storm had settled, and then you'd have gone back to the way things were. Formal visits once a month, polite conversations about nothing, constant hints about selling the house. Scarlett fidgeted on the couch. Violet, I know you're hurt right now, and you have every right to be. But think of Henry Jr. It's not fair to disinherit him because of his parents' mistake. Well, here's your attempt at pity. I'm not disinheriting Henry, I replied calmly. An educational fund has been set up for him, which will be available to him when he reaches the age of 25. 18 years from now, Scarlett exclaimed. And what about before then? We have to pay for all his expenses ourselves, college, his first home, all without the help we were counting on? I smiled. Isn't that what all parents do? Isn't it their responsibility to provide for their children? Or did you only see me as a source of funding? Of course not, Aiden answered quickly. Scarlett's just worried. We both are. The last few years have been difficult. The mortgage, Scarlett's job loss, my problems with my promotion. But that's no reason to demand that I sell the house I've lived in most of my life. I shook my head. And it certainly wasn't a reason for what happened at the restaurant. Scarlett suddenly burst into tears, a loud wailing sob. Aiden put his arm around her, giving me an accusing look. Are you happy now? You made a man hysterical. I watched the scene with detached interest. Scarlett's tears looked genuine, but something in her posture, in the way she glanced at me through her fingers now and then, suggested that the crying was staged. Calm your wife down, Aiden. I stood up. If she keeps this up, the neighbors are going to think someone's being murdered in here. Aiden stroked Scarlett's back, whispering something soothing to her. Gradually, her sobs subsided into quiet sobs. You're completely heartless, Aiden said, looking at me with sudden anger. You always have been. Remember when you forbade me to go to summer camp with my friends because you wanted me to stay behind to help my dad with the repairs? Or how you criticized my first girlfriend before we broke up? I was stunned by this sudden flood of accusations. Aiden, you were 14, and that camp had a questionable reputation. And as for Laurel, she cheated on you with your best friend, and you discovered it yourself. See? He pointed his finger at me. Always an excuse. She was always right. And now, instead of forgiving our mistake, you're throwing us out of your life and disinheriting us. I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. Aiden, I'm not throwing you out of my life. I'm just not going to let you two manipulate me or humiliate me anymore. And yes, I've changed my will. It's my right. The house will go to a museum, with the bulk of the money going to charity, but there are stipulated amounts for you and Henry Jr. as well. Crumbs! Scarlett blurted out, stopping crying instantly. Compared to what Aiden should have gotten. Should have? I raised an eyebrow. That's an interesting way of putting it. Like you already thought it was yours. You know what I meant. She waved her hand irritably. Aiden is your only son. It's only natural that he should inherit the house and everything else. Maybe it would be natural if my son treated me with respect and care. I looked at Aiden. If he would protect me instead of indulging in your insults and manipulations. Aiden jumped up. That's what this is. This is punishment. You're punishing me like you did when I was a child. No, Aiden, I shook my head. It's not a punishment, it's a consequence of your own actions, or rather, the lack of them. You didn't intervene when your wife humiliated me. You didn't defend me when she slapped me. You didn't even call the next day to see how I was feeling. And now that the inheritance was at stake, you suddenly remembered that I was your mother? Tears welled up in Aiden's eyes. It's not fair, Mom. I love you. I always have. It's just, it's just that Scarlett can be very persistent sometimes, and so now it's my fault? Scarlett was outraged, jumping up beside him. So, it's all my fault, is it? The witch who manipulated your poor son? I watched them, feeling strangely detached, like I was watching a poorly staged play with overacting actors. I think you'd better leave, I said calmly. You're both upset, and this conversation isn't going anywhere. We're not going anywhere until you change the will back. Scarlett jabbed her finger at me. You have no right to deprive Aiden of his rightful inheritance. I have every right. I remained firm. And if you don't leave right now, I'm calling the police. You wouldn't dare. Scarlett crossed her arms over her chest. I pulled my cell phone out of my pocket. Shall we check? Aiden grabbed Scarlett's hand. Let's go, honey. This conversation is really pointless. He turned to me. Mom, please think again. I realize you're angry right now, and you have a right to be. But don't make decisions you'll regret later. The only thing I regret, I replied, is that I didn't see what you've become. Then I wouldn't have had to go through that humiliation at the restaurant. You'll regret it, Scarlett hissed, heading for the exit, when you die alone, with no family around. Aiden grimaced, but didn't contradict his wife. Instead, he followed her to the door, giving me one last pleading look. Mom, please. I shook my head. Goodbye, Aiden. I hope someday you'll understand. As I closed the door behind them, I leaned my back against it and closed my eyes. The pain throbbed somewhere deep inside, but with it came relief, as if a heavy weight had finally been lifted from my shoulders. This meeting had finally convinced me that I'd made the right decision. Their insincere apologies, attempts to manipulate my feelings, sudden accusations of past misdeeds, all this showed the true nature of our current relationship. They didn't see me as a person, only a source of inheritance, a hindrance to be overcome. I returned to the living room and picked up Henry's photograph. His wise eyes seemed to look at me with understanding. You always said the day would come when I'd have to let Aiden go and live my own life, I whispered. But you never warned me that it would hurt so much. The logs crackled quietly in the fireplace. Dusk was fading outside the window. I stared at the lilies Aiden and Scarlett had brought, a perfectly matched bouquet of my favorite flowers, as fake as their apology. Tomorrow I'm taking these flowers to Henry's grave. Let them serve some good. Decorate the resting place of a man who truly loved me, not my inheritance. Spring always came suddenly in Gardnerville, as if someone had flipped a switch and the world was filled with colors, smells, sounds. It had been almost 6 months since I'd changed my will, 4 months since Aiden and Scarlett's last visit. The winter months passed in a quiet, slightly painful realization of a new reality, life without my son and his family. That morning, I was working in the garden, pruning the rose bushes, preparing them for a new season of blooming. Henry always said I had a special talent for handling roses. They feel your love, Violet, he joked when neighbors marveled at the lushness of the blooms in our garden. Violette, good morning. Iris's voice interrupted my thoughts. She was waving at me over the fence, holding a package. I baked a blueberry pie. Would you like to join me for tea? I'd love to. I took off my gardening gloves. Just give me 10 minutes to get cleaned up. On my way to Iris's, I picked up the mail from the box, a few advertising brochures, an electric bill, and a letter from Aiden. A letter from Aiden. I recognized his handwriting on the envelope and froze for a moment. He'd tried to call several times over the months, but I hadn't answered. It was his first letter. At Iris's house, we discussed her recent watercolor exhibit, my plans to lead a teen literature class at the library, and the new painting class I'd signed up for. You look pensive, Iris remarked as she put a piece of pie on my plate. Is something wrong? I pulled an envelope out of my bag. Aiden sent a letter. Iris frowned. And you haven't opened it yet? No. I shook my head. I'm not sure I want to. I understand. She set the dessert spoon aside. Are you afraid he'll try to manipulate you again? Not only that, I sighed. I'm afraid his words will reopen the wound. I was just getting better, Iris. I've started to build a new life, one with room for creativity, for friends, for new discoveries. I don't want to wallow in that pain and disappointment again. You know, I finally said, I'll read the letter, but not right now, when I'm ready. That evening, sitting in Henry's chair with a cup of tea, I finally decided to open the envelope. Aiden's handwriting was so familiar, a slight slant to the right, with distinctive loops. Dear Mom, Aiden wrote, I've been wondering for a long time if I should write this letter. It has been several months since we last met, and all this time I have been trying to understand what has happened to our family, to our relationship. First of all, I want to apologize, not a formal one, not because of the will or the money, but a real, sincere forgiveness for the pain I caused you. You were right. That night at the restaurant, I did get a chuckle out of Scarlett hitting you. It was a momentary reflex action that I am ashamed of to this day. Our marriage to Scarlett is over. We broke up 3 months ago after trying to keep things going. I won't go into the details. It doesn't matter to you. All I'll say is that I finally realized how toxic our relationship was and how it was affecting everyone around us, including you and Henry Jr. I'm not asking you to put me back in the will or give me another chance. I just wanted you to know I've realized my mistakes and am working on myself to be a better person. Henry Jr. misses you. If you ever want to see him, without me, if you feel more comfortable that way, just let me know. With love and remorse, Aiden. I dropped the letter into my lap and closed my eyes. Tears flowed down my cheeks. Not bitter tears like before, but some kind of light, cleansing tears. Aiden had admitted his mistakes. He hadn't asked for money or to be put back in the will, only for Henry Jr. to be able to see his grandmother. How did that make me feel? Relief? Yes. Sadness? Yes. The urge to call him immediately, tell him all was forgiven. No, that didn't happen. The wound was too deep to heal from one letter, even a sincere one. The next morning, I woke up feeling light. It was going to be a busy day. A meeting with Knox, then lunch with the Mortensons, a book club meeting in the evening. On my way to Knox's, I met Sarah, my new neighbor, a young woman with 2 small children who had recently moved into the house across the street after a divorce. Violet, she waved at me. I was wondering if I could sign Lily up for your writing class. I know it's for teenagers, and she's only 9, but she loves to read so much. Sure, I smiled. Let her come. Knox greeted me in his office with his usual reserved warmth. You look beautiful, Violet, he said. Something has changed in you. I smiled. A lot has changed, Knox. I got a letter from Aiden. He's admitted his mistakes, and he's not asking for anything in return. He and Scarlett broke up. Are you going to see him? Not right now, I shook my head. Maybe someday, but I'd like to see my grandson. Don't you regret your decision to change the will? Knox asked after discussing the details of the educational fund for his grandson. I wondered, no, I don't. The fact that Aiton had begun to change was fine, but it doesn't negate the consequences for his past actions. Besides, I believe that my decision to donate most of the inheritance to charity will do more good. I thought you'd say that, Knox smiled. Henry would be proud of you, you know. That evening, I sat in the garden under the old apple tree and took out a notebook and pen. It was time to write a reply to Aidan, a short letter saying that I appreciated his honesty, that I needed more time, but that I'd be happy to see Henry Jr., not a promise of complete forgiveness, but not a final breakup either. Just a small step toward when I was ready to take it. In the meantime, I had a life of my own, filled with new friends, new interests, new joys, a life in which I finally learned to value myself, my desires, and my dignity, a life in which I could be not only a mother and grandmother, but also an independent woman with her own dreams and plans. The spring sun gently warmed my shoulders, the wind rustled the leaves, and a bird sang somewhere in the distance. I closed my eyes, letting myself just be in the moment, here and now, free of past resentments and fears of the future. At 74, I finally realized what Henry had so often said. Life is not what happens to you, but how you respond to it. And I chose to respond with dignity, wisdom, and an open heart, ready for new beginnings and a new chapter of my life.